Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm going to talk about the five major events that have impacted the Middle East in 2022. For those of you who are here for the first time, please subscribe to Khanversations. Do ring the bell icon so you get notifications about my videos when I post them. And if you really like this video, do share it with your friends and with your network. And I would like to also tell you that I have done similar videos about the events, 5 events that have impacted the US, 5 events that have impacted the world, and the ones that have had global impact, and 5 events which have impacted India. And you can find them all in the playlist that I will provide a link to in the description of this video. So let's begin with the Middle East. I must alert you that as someone who looks more at the geopolitics rather than the culture of the Middle East, the events that I have thought and consider as most impactful in the Middle East are essentially geopolitical in nature, except one. So I think that the best thing that has happened in the Middle East this year was the FIFA World Cup, which was hosted by a Middle Eastern country, Qatar, an Arab country. This is the first time that this such an important global event has been hosted in this part of the world, and it was one of the best events of the year 2022 in a world that is at war, in a world that is under pressure from inflation, the decline of global economy, suffering from starvation, food insecurity, and the pandemic. This was one event that brought the world together and provided a lot of joy and happiness and excitement to a lot of people in the world. It also helped develop a counter narrative about the Middle East and the Muslim world, which has been suffering from Islamophobic discourses, probably coming mostly coming from the West. And even during the coverage of the FIFA World Cup, it was very clear that many Western media outlets could not contain their, shall we say, disdain and their racism towards Arabs and Muslims. But having said that, this FIFA World Cup was also special in many ways. Obviously, the success of the Moroccan national team, which reached the semi-final, the first Arab and the first African team to reach the semi-finals of a FIFA World Cup. And in the process, it beat so many European teams. It beat Portugal, it beat Spain, and it beat Belgium. It lost to France. But this was really a very important achievement by Morocco. It brought a lot of joy and happiness to a lot of people, not just in Morocco, but in the Arab world and the Muslim world, and the global South, for that matter. And I hope that their performance inspires more young people to not just play soccer and excel at soccer, but excel in a way that they leave a global impact. And there was also in this World Cup a lot of victories for countries from the region. So Iran beat Wales, Saudi Arabia beat Argentina, the ultimate winner of the tournament. So there have been lots of internet memes about who the real world champion is, Argentina or Saudi Arabia. And then Tunisia. I mean, the country has been suffering in more ways than one for the last 2 years, and they beat France, and I hope that brought some joy and solace to that country. So these were some of the more interesting events for the Middle East in the region. The second event that I think is perhaps the most important event for 2022 in the Middle East is President Xi Jinping's visit to Saudi Arabia, where he had a summit with Saudi Arabia. Then he had a kind of a summit with GCC leaders and also a summit with the entire Arab world. So it was as if China has now formally entered the Middle East. Already the trade relations with Saudi Arabia are in the excess of $60-70 billion. Both the countries have committed to each other in terms of promising to invest in each other's infrastructure. And I think the 34 agreements that Saudi Arabia and China have signed up, if they even achieve half of those, even if half of those agreements are materialized, then this will be a game changer in the Middle East. It will not only transform the Middle East, but it will also transform the global structure, with China becoming a really major player in the Middle East. I have done an entire conversations on Xi Jinping's visit to Saudi Arabia and contrasted it with Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia in 2022. And so you can also see that video. I will provide a link in the video description to that Khanversations too. The next event that I think is significant in the Middle East is the protests in Iran. Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old young woman, was killed in the custody of the morality police because her hijab had slipped a little. She probably showed far less forehead than I'm showing right now, but it is such a tragic event, a young life taken just because a piece of cloth moved from maybe here to here. And the persistent protests. I pray for the Iranians who are protesting. I admire their courage. I am with them. I stand with them. And these protests have now lasted for months. And people from every walk of life, teachers, farmers, scholars, intellectuals, athletes, sports. A young chess player decided not to wear a hijab while competing in the world. So the rejection of the authoritarian and shall we say, oppressive Iranian regime is widespread. And this is no matter how much the Iranian government says that this is a Zionist conspiracy or a US conspiracy, the spontaneity of the protest, the widespreadness and the persistence of the protest in the face of brutal violence from the Iranian regime is breathtaking. What is also interesting is that there are two things about this protest which are significant and will have an impact on the Iranian regime. Number one is how widespread it is and how many people from so many different walks of life are protesting. And the second thing is that it is very clear that we see the signs that these protests have for the first time divided the ruling elite and the conservative elite. So there are lots of conservative leaders who are distancing themselves from what happened, and people like Khatami and others are arguing that there should be a need for dialogue, for protests, for opposition, for discussion. And so hopefully, and I'm really, really hopeful that there will be some freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of existence available to Iranians after this. So the best thing would happen would be that we get rid of this regime, really. Iran needs to become a democracy. And I guarantee you, if Iran becomes a democracy, it will be a vibrant, intellectually, perhaps the most vibrant society in the Middle East. Not only that, the world will flock to Iran to enjoy their culture, to engage with them. Iran will become a booming economy. All it needs to do is get rid of the mullahs and become a democracy. There is no doubt in my mind that the future of the Iranians will be forever in peril if they continue with this regime. So it's very important that these protests have a positive impact. Talking about regime change, there has been a regime change in Israel, and this is the fourth point that I want to point out. This is an impactful, so whatever happens in Israel has a huge impact in the Middle East. Israel has elected its fifth government in 3 years. It has elected perhaps one of the most right-wing, extremist, fascist government that it has had. And Israel is Bibi Netanyahu is a poster child for fascism, extremism. He's the king of apartheid, and he's back, and he's in cahoots with people who make him look like Mary Poppins. We are talking about people, parties such as Jewish Power and religious Zionism. These are extreme right-wing fascists who do not believe in the two-state solutions, who probably will ratchet up. They're going to be in the government and they're going to hold important positions, the leaders of those parties. And I just hope that Israel, true to form, will quickly, this government will quickly collapse and we will have another election and another government in Israel, less extremist than the current one. But it is going to be interesting to see how the Arab world, which have signed on to Abrahamic Accords in the hope that normalizing relations with Israel will make Israel a more normal country and will make them deal with the Palestinians in a more positive way. So far, I see no signs of that at all. And we'll see what happens if this government and its members start oppressing the Palestinians more, as if that is possible, because the previous government did a pretty good job of making the lives of Palestinians more and more miserable with the help of, obviously, the United States, which protects Israel no matter what it does, continues to support it. But this extreme government is going to test the resoluteness of U.S. support for Israel and also its new partners in the Middle East, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and others. So this is, I think, one of the worst things that's happened in the Middle East. In talking about elections, it reminds me of the Tunisian election in December with less than 12% turnout. Tunisia, I'm not counting it as one of the five, but it is a tragedy. Tunisia was a hope for democracy in the Arab world. And with what has happened and transpired in Tunisia, one can safely say that there is no democracy in the Arab world at the moment. And I don't see any hope for democracy in the Arab world in the immediate future. But I hope that the young people in the Middle East, they deserve a future of freedom and opportunity, and things will change soon, inshallah, in the Middle East. And the last and the fifth most important development, which has been going on since mid-2021, is what I consider it is very important. Many of you may not, is the Iran-Saudi dialogue. It hasn't progressed much since summer, but at least one positive outcome of that dialogue is that the war in Yemen has receded. The suffering of the Yemenis has become much, much less than what it was before. So I think that is enough. This dialogue can produce some peace and some quiet on the Yemeni front. I will take that any day. But there is hope that at least these two countries are talking to each other. And it is very critical because it is the fear of Iran which led to the Abrahamic Accords, which I see as abandonment of the Palestinian cause. It is the threat of Iran, the fear from Iran, which made the threat of Iran and the uncertainty of support from the US. The US has become increasingly unreliable in the Middle East, and its footprint has also diminished significantly in the Middle East. That's why China is there. So the fact that Iran was threatening Arab nations, even attacked Saudi Arabia with drones and rockets in 2019, these two things have basically driven these paranoid Arab countries into the lap of Israel. So the Abrahamic Accords are basically an expression of help, help, help. Iranians are going to eat us up, and the US is not promising to help us. So they run to Israel. So I have a feeling that if Saudi Arabia and Iranian relations improve, the threat of Iran diminishes, and then perhaps the Arabs and Arab states can have more dignity in their diplomacy and foreign policy. So I hope that you found these five events that I have identified as the most impactful in the Middle East, thought-provoking and interesting. Perhaps you agree with me, perhaps you don't. That's all right. You are welcome to post your disagreements or your agreements in the comments. And if you have not yet subscribed to Khanversation, please do so, and also ring the bell icon so that you get notified when I post my next video. Do check out the other conversations about the impactful events in the Middle East, in the world, in the US, and in India too. And until next time, this is Muqtedar Khan for Khanversations. Happy New Year, and may you all have a more peaceful, more prosperous, more pandemic-free 2023.